Hi there. This is the first or the second session of OpenGL. I'm learning OpenGL, and I thought I'd pass on the knowledge to anybody that's actually interested in it, and also just for my own sake, just to actually clarify and detail exactly what I'm going through. I've created this project based on Nihi's project here, and this right here is actually my own mutations of what he had. So I've actually taken my own code and moved it around, so I actually have the capability to move around with the OpenGL space on an XY axis, or XZ axis, my bad. And you can actually put in some mouse looking here too to make it easier. So you can actually move this to separate coordinates that springs back to the point that you had to begin with. What I've done is here on the sides, I've created an OpenGL cylinder. I move that in time based on a certain constant speed, and the same thing holds true for the ceiling too. The ceiling. Now I can actually move back and forth and see the ceiling. Now what I've also done is I've created some capabilities to move up and down with the mouse. So here I'll just demonstrate real quick. This is the mouse wheel that's actually doing that. So you can't see the mouse wheel outside. And you can also look around too. So this is the ability to look around. Now the cylinder section here is clearly slanted. Now what I do not have on this is collision detecting. So I can pass right through the walls like this, and you can see my skybox. And this is actually a real photo that was taken with Google Street View, and it has the capability to be able to do a panoramic 360-degree view. So actually what I did was I stitched those together. You can actually see the stitching right there. It doesn't look all that great. So it's a little bit unseamless at points. There's a seam that's actually a little bit interesting to see too. And I just stitched all these images together so you can get a full 360-degree fake view that actually makes it look like you're going around. I also took a texture from the bottom here. You can see that texture down here. It's a real desert texture. So I have a lot of work to do with this when it comes down to understanding how this all functions. And you can actually go through and make the determination or see that I have some work to do when it comes to the animation down at the lowest level. So it's clearly not blended in like it should be. Or I should say, it doesn't look natural. You can actually see the pixelation as you turn around. And with the skybox, I didn't put a roof on it, so you can actually see that there's no roof on this. So it's a little bit incomplete. I could have been a little bit less lazy and put a blue color on top. And my spaceship on the exterior is this. And what I did was I just had a cylinder at the bottom, a small cylinder down here at the bottom that goes up maybe two units or 0.2 units of OpenGL units. And I pretty well textured the exterior, which you get up close and you can actually see the texture still retains its resolution pretty well. And also on top of it, I have a earth that I superimposed on another texture that I ended up finding. And you can see that that looks pretty sweet. Now I go down, and one other thing that I did for the animation for this is make it so the base unit actually spins around by pressing the 9 and 0 keys. So that right there is the base unit moving around. Make it look like a UFO. You can spin it up real fast if you want, or you can slow it back down. There's the slowdown right there. Now, clearly I did a little bit more work on this than what Nihi had on the OpenGL stuff, if you're paying attention. One other feature of this too is this is 40 units by 40 units. That's my canvas size. That's what I'm calling it. And you can actually see over here where the skybox, that's what they call it, ends. You can see that ending over there. And what I've done is you can actually see, the terrain, my terrain here, and over there. So this is 40 units right there, and that's 100 units away. Now, in the future, what I'll probably do is a cylindrical section and texture map that entire thing so we don't get the effect of every time it reaches a corner, it dips down. like it does in each one of these corners. So it goes up, goes down, goes up again a little bit, goes back down. That's not just a feature of the images, that's a feature of the fact that I put this in a square, and that's what's causing the problems. And the other thing you can do is go underneath. There's nothing underneath that you're going to see other than you'll see the texture. Now, some problems with this, the way I approach things is, if you get farther away from there, you start seeing that texture bleeds through. That texture bleeds through, and you can actually see that that texture is coming through and giving it some really bad look, as you get further away. Now, this has something to do with the spacing. If I go right inside a little bit, you might be able to see the spacing in between the two, between the interior and the exterior. So that exterior wall right there is actually giving that problem with that as you get further away. So this for me was a learning exercise, just to actually see a little bit of animation. I took the lights off on this one, so the lights are turned off on the texture. So these are just the clean textures without lights, OpenGL lights applied. And I ended up having quite a few problems trying to dive into the lighting. And depth testing is on, but the lighting was my biggest bear with this exercise. So coming back to the project itself, what I did was I've got some objects I created, so I'm making this OpenGL more or less object oriented. And over here, I've got the project itself that I leveraged the objects that I had from before. So I've got an atom, a circle, a cone. Now, I didn't really use any of these. I just ported them over, and I more or less grabbed code from them for now, with the exception of the GL skin object, which I actually use down here. Now that GL skin object has some nifty little features I included with it that just allows you to very quickly allocate a texture, and if you go look at that texture itself, you can see that I do the bind texture right here, and you can scale it on the fly. So if you've got if you want to stretch this over certain sections and everything, that's standard OpenGL stuff. So a couple of things that I've been doing, and also at the end for the delete, it handles all the wrap-up for all the memory allocations that's actually done within the project itself. So it actually, I took a look at, so there's actually the allocation for the texture itself. That's where it gets it from the disk, and then from there it handles the delete. So read in at that moment, it'll allocate the memory for it, and at that point everything should be hunky-dory. So what I've done, I also forgot to show you the HUD. So if we go over here, bring up that artist project again. I also did a little bit of development for the HUD. So down below, you actually see some of those objects off to the side. I prototyped them and created a Star Trek-looking HUD, heads-up display is what it's called. I don't have fonts enabled for it yet, but you can turn it off and on with the H key. So that's off, that's on. So that makes it pretty nice. And also, on the outside, I forgot to show you this too, I've got a grid. So you can actually see the grid applied, to see where things are. Now, that should have turned everything red like that, so that's a little fault with my code. But the grid itself, you can see here, you can actually see each one of those is one OpenGL unit. Now, I'm going to equate that to a meter to make it easy. I should probably be doing feet with it, but let's be honest, meters are to some degree a little bit easier when it comes to doing flat linear textures. So, and it actually works out quite well with the OpenGL. So some practices that I already got into. Here's what I ended up doing with the heads-up display. So here's a heads-up display up here, draw HUD. And practices that I'm getting into already is with the GL matrix. Whenever I get into a matrix, I set up the matrix, I load the identity, and then at that point I'll apply textures. In this case, I don't have textures, and then I'll switch it over to model view, and at that point I'll actually start the drawing process. Now in this case right here, I've got a canvas object that I've created, And if you go over here, not GL premises, over to LCARs, I've got a button, a canvas, and a control base. Now, every control has a control base. And the canvas has a control base as its base object. It inherited from it. Button has that as a base object too. In that canvas, I actually will do the left. I'll set the dimensions for it. So with this one, the left is going to be 10 pixels in or whatever. That's actually 10 pixels. The height's going to be 85 pixels. It's going to be screen height minus 100 pixels for the height of the, or for the top of it, and then the width minus 20. It's going to be, so we'll subtract from the left side that we have dented over 10. We'll minus the other 10 pixels on the right-hand side to give us a perfect offset on both the right-hand and left-hand side. Now, I've made up my button object too, and this is going to be standard with any of my displays that I create that has the canvas that you set it to, so it's more or less very similar to attaching it to a window. You've got a left and a top, a height and width that you set for that button, which is going to be relative to that canvas. Now, if you don't set that canvas up, this will currently fall. And I also set the foreground colors. What I'm doing is actually naming this based on the LCARs, the whole Star Trek whole world. Now, I started working with captions, and at that point, I started coming across a problem with C-string. So I ended up creating my own allocation function for C-string, and which actually works out pretty slick. So I can actually manage my own, or do my own memory management. But I won't get into the problems with that because this is more about OpenGL than it is the design of the user interface, although the user interface does make a difference here. Now, once I've added all these to the canvas, so I add all these different buttons to the canvas, all I have to do is issue a draw command to that canvas every time. And I don't have to go through the process of recreating that entire scene once I've done that. And at that point, I've made it a habit to, because GL is a state machine, which I hear repeated all over the place, which can be really freaking annoying at times, it remembers its state. At this point, what I'm doing is I'm making it a fact to, within the routines, that I make any changes to that are required for this, I also undo those changes down at the end. Now, pop matrix is supposed to change translational information back. I thought it might handle scale information, but it doesn't necessarily do that. And then for the HUD, the last thing that I do is I throw it back into the GL perspective mode, which is the three-dimensional mode that it gets back into. Now, the function that I created was the draw 4. Now, here you actually see where I started, I make it a fact to indent everything that I do after I change the matrix mode, just for readability's sake. It makes it a hell of a lot easier to follow. And this, at this point, I switch over the texture. I told it to bind my texture, and at that point, I actually scale that texture to the canvas size. Now, I had canvas size times 2. That was a little bit slower because I'm rendering, copying that image so many times. So I'm going to have to play with that, but I'm also going to have to figure out the textures and the way things work in order to get a more realistic ground. I mean, it's a beautiful texture, but the problem is it just doesn't look like the real world, which is what I'm trying to get to. And then I switch to model view, and like this right here, you can read my notes if you want to, but draw grid is the thing that's responsible for drawing the grid, the red grid that I showed you. And from there, I end up going through and drawing the lines, and from there, I actually go through and I draw the lines for the grid, which are all 1 meter apart, and then the skybox is the last part. Now that's actually where I take the images that I pulled from YouTube or from Google Street View, and at that point, I end up translating those. So I have. I shouldn't say translating. I've got the skybox, and I've got the vertexes that I draw for the wall. And all I'm doing for that is placing rectangles, giant rectangles on the wall. Now, each rectangle is equivalent to about 100 meters across, and it sinks down about 20 meters down below the actual floor level, just so I can actually have it seamless and make it appear realistic. And from there, I had a problem with the seamlessness because the way that, we'll put it this way, I had to rotate the texture from there in order to be able to make that one appear for, you had the front one done first, and then the one off the left, or one off the right next. I had to rotate that and then switch it around in order to flip it back around. So I drew my text coordinates. Now this is something to understand about the coordinates. It starts in the upper left-hand corner. That's what the 0, 0 means. And then from there, the 1 is the x, and the 0 for the next one. For this one right here is the y. Or I'm calling it xy. I'm not too sure if it means something else. But I go from the left all the way to the right top. And then from there, I go from that to the bottom right, and then from there all the way back over to the left. Well, for this one, I did it differently because the texture actually comes out inverted because it's drawing at a different angle. So I drew these, and this is just, all this is doing is gathering that information from the bitmap on the disk and then displaying it on the separate vertexes that I'm drawing for the rectangle. So from there, I did that for the next one. I unrotate it, because anything that I do, my own personal rule that I have is anything I do for rotation or translation, I undo. So this one, I rotated that texture 90 degrees, and then I unrotate it back 90 degrees. So from there, I do the same thing for the next texture. I rotate that, go back, and then from there, I draw the final piece, which completes the skybox altogether. Now, the last thing, or I shouldn't say the last, yeah, this is the last thing. The draw room, I go through, and this is actually part of the Niki's tutorial. I extracted this, and I actually get a quadratic, which I could probably trim this out even further and get this once. This gets it every time. And then from there, I actually start the process of drawing separate objects. Now, the thing to note, here's how I do the rotation, which is just more or less a translation for everything that comes through. And to also note, I do a translation, and then I undo that translation right after that, too. So anytime I have any kind of movement of perspective, I always reset it back to the way I originally received it. Which just I don't know, it seems to be a nice habit that I'm in, that that kind of respects the drawing and makes it easier to figure things out later, especially after all the crap that I went through for putting this together. So this right here, this right here is the main section, so you can actually see that I'm drawing the cylinder, which is the rotating cylinder part. So if I come back over here, you can see that this rotating cylinder is moving the xy, my x and my y, which is defined as a constant above. And then from there, I actually handle the translation, the rotation of it. So at that point, I'm actually saying, I want this one to be a little bit off the floor, which gives me this look that actually separates that from the ground texture that can actually rotate down here, that piece right there. And from there, I'll go through and I'll rotate that texture back rotate the object back. So my XY axis, I'm still trying to figure out something with my XY axis. That's why I'm doing all those rotations for this. So I'll be the first to admit I'm still learning this crap. But the rotations, especially with the XY, it was making more sense for me to rotate this. And so I can actually understand the XY axis and locational information for it. And then the texture itself, I take that texture and I scale it. So 12 times, or actually, it's more or less a reduction of what's going on here. That's taking that bitmap, rather than taking it all the way one. This is more or less being copied 12 times all around. So it's one bitmap. If you go look at this thing on disk, it's going to keep on rotating until I press that. It senses that stop key. If you go take a look at that texture on disk, that one's a blue futuristic. Here's the texture on disk. So it's just that one texture is being repeated a number of times right here. So 12 times altogether. That's all that's saying. And then, in order for me to back out of that scale, I'll actually take that and I'll reduce it by 1/12. Now, if I don't do that, that screws up the rest of my model, and what you'll see is everything from then on will actually start getting messed up and start spinning around too fast, because of my axis changes and everything over time. Even if I took that out, the textures wouldn't come across right. So I just make it a fact to undo anything I do right after the operation I do it. So again, I rotate, I draw the cylinder for the chandelier section of things, and then I unrotate it. So if you go take a look at this, I'll scroll up a little bit so you can see the chandelier portion of things. So I draw that, and that's that at that point. Say it's got a little bit of an edge to it. So that right there is the left, or the top of it, and that right there is the bottom of it. And then from there, I'll go through it and I'll do the disc portion, which is putting a lid on the thing underneath it. So if you take a look right here, you see that there's a lid to it. And all that is just a little disc. So it's a circular disc that's 0.03 meters in diameter. And from there, I start drawing the ceiling texture, which this is the vibrant piece that's moving. And I do the same thing. Disc, rotate, and I keep on doing the same thing over and over again. So, drawing the separate objects. Now, I ended up, I had the GL primitives that I could have used for it, but I was having all kinds of problems with the GL rotation, translate, and the drawing functions. I was finding that there wasn't a really good standard way to do this. And because of that, I actually extracted the code from my objects. Let's say, here's for instance, the sphere is not necessarily as applicable. We'll go into the disk. So at this point, you've got a disk. You know what? Make it a little bit easier. Where's the circle? There's the circle. So the circle, I've got to, at this point, nothing in the circle. So it's drawing a flat-out circle. Well, at this point, I've got the capability to be able to extract things such as the inner diameter right there, the outer diameter, the number of segments to use for that circle. But the problem comes down to, what have I gained by the abstraction of putting this into an object? And to be honest, I've actually lost something because I'm adding functional requests to this when I can actually make the GL call directly right here. So in this case here, an object abstraction isn't going to work to my best advantage. Where the GL skin does, because I'm reusing that all over the place. So I'm finding the object-oriented aspect of things. It's on a need to use basis. It's not something I at first time I thought I'd be able to use objects all over the place, but I'm finding that's quite the opposite at this point. Now the elements though, for the elements over here, the LCARS elements, that stands for Library Computer Access Retrieval System. If you're a Star Trek fan, that actually handles the creation of those objects, and you can see it handles the calculation of those in a pretty complex little format. That actually goes through and it gets the vertices based on the canvas, and the positional information that you're drawing this one. So it's not exactly it's a pretty complex little deal that goes through and does a draw for a simple button, just to get one of those cool little, circles down here, 2 circles and a rectangle. Now, to actually get those captions working, it's going to be the next little bit of a bit. So I've got a little bit of work to figure out when it comes down to doing that. But when it comes down to the GL, I've got myself a list of to-do things. So here's some of the calculation information it sets up. And I also can turn on the grid. I can turn the room on. And I don't think I demonstrated that. So R, so that actually shows the room, no room. So I can actually move around, and you can see the speed difference because it's actually not even rendering any of those objects. And there it is. So it's a hell of a lot slower, with that rendering. So I could probably work on the efficiency of that a little bit. But this is for me, what I'm calling version 1.0 of this thing. So on the version 2.0 that I'm going to be working on, the terrain doesn't look real. So I'm going to work on the jagging effects for that. The next model will focus on basic objects with realism, blending, materials, and lighting. I've really got to work on that lighting. The skybox, again, I complained about that. I've still got some things to fix with that. And it looks decent, but it's still heavy with the size of the texture. The bitmaps are freaking huge. You can actually see the size of these things. Desert Craft is 12 meg. That's not compressed bitmap, by the way. And these right here are 1024 by 1024. So I've got to figure out a better way to actually store those things. So just actually, I'd like to store it as a resource. And the next version will also work on viewports, more or less a bigger on the inside type deal. So what I would like to do is get this thing functioning much like a TARDIS would. The end goal, after all, with my development for this, at least this portion of the project, is to create something where you have a simple telephone-like booth that you can walk into, and this is what you see when you walk on the inside. So anyways, that's about it for now, and thank you for listening.